Hello and welcome to the Manitowoc Ice Training Center. My name is Tanner. Today we're going to be covering the Koolair and NEO control board LEDs. To get us started, we'll jump into that presentation. Alright, before we get too far into it, there's just a little reminder. There is a quiz at the end of this spotlight, so if you want to test what you've learned, go ahead and take that quiz. And also a reminder, we do not print off the results for these quizzes. To get those results, all you got to do is complete the quiz, go ahead and hit submit, and then just take a screenshot or a screen grab of what your results were. So to begin, we're going to talk about the board itself just a little bit. An important thing to remember is that both Koolair and NEO use the same board. Now these boards that we're talking about, exact same board, pretty much down to a T. Maybe a couple minor differences and then some differences in programming. We'll go over that as well. The biggest thing to remember is how this board tells these machines apart. Now the way it tells is what UI system, the user interface system, that is connected. So if it has a toggle switch from a Koolair, it knows that it is attached to a Koolair. And then if it has the touchpad from a NEO, it is attached to a NEO. So that's just something to keep in mind when we're going through. But in general, they're pretty similar as far as LEDs, just some minor program differences. So we're going to start with Koolair and the LEDs there. So our very first LED is going to be that water fill LED. It is a red LED and is lit up when the water inlet valve is energized. So meaning water should be going into the water trough and slowly filling that up. Now once that high level probe or that high level float is satisfied, the water inlet valve will stop and then that LED will stop as well. You'll normally see this on during pre-chill whenever water is filling up the trough. Now speaking of floats, we'll go ahead and cover the high and low. Our first float is the low level float or the harvest float. Now these LEDs are going to be green, they're going to be both green, and they will be lit when that ball is floating on water or it is in the open position. Now our harvest float here tells the machine to go into harvest. That's why it's called the harvest float, right? So once that water lifts up that ball, it'll go ahead, it's ready to go, and then once it hits the bottom of that stem, it says, okay, we used the right amount of water, we're going to go ahead and drop a batch of ice. Now that's our harvest float. Our next float is the high level float or the water level float. Okay, these kind of work in tandem, but more importantly, this float works with the water inlet valve. Now again, same as the low level float, it will be lit green when that little bobber is floating on water and it isn't touching the bottom of that stem. Now the main purpose of this float is to tell the ice machine when it has enough water. Now this ice machine is a batch system, so that means it just goes on how much water is inside the trough to make that slab of ice. So if you want a thicker slab of ice, this is the float that you will adjust. You can make it go higher up to have more water, which will give you more ice, or you can make it go down to have a little less ice. Because remember, this Koolair and the NEO are batch systems. They don't sense ice on the evap, they just sense how much water has been used. Alright, those are our floats. Our next LED will be the bin switch LED. Now this LED will be solid green whenever that curtain is closed. So if you have it closed, there's a magnet there. It's sensing that the curtain is closed, and then once it opens, that light will go out for however long that curtain is open, and then when it goes back shut, it'll go ahead and turn that light back on. Now this is something that's important when trying to troubleshoot a bin switch. Say you're having some freeze up issues, what you can do is test that. You can lift up that curtain. You should see the LED go out. If it doesn't go out, there could be a decent issue with your bin switch. Go ahead and ohm out the bin switch and double check that it is in proper working order. So that's a simple LED, it's green, but it's pretty useful. Next is our safety limit 1 LED. It is for the long freeze safety limit. Now you'll see this flash or be solid after 3 consecutive 35 to 60 minute freeze times or freeze cycles. you'll see that flash after 3 consecutive. After 6 consecutive freeze cycles that are 35 to 60 minutes long, the ice machine will shut down and that LED will be a solid red. Now the reason I'm saying 35 to 60 minute freeze cycles is because depending on which software is downloaded onto that board, that will dictate whether or not you're looking for a 35-minute freeze or a 60-minute freeze. So for software 3.2 and before, it's going to be a 60-minute, and then everything after, it's going to be 35. You'll be able to tell what software is on that board, at least from the factory. You can look at a sticker on top of those relays, and it should be on there for you to see. Next is our Safety Limit 2 LED, or a Long Harvest LED. You'll see this LED after 3 consecutive 3.5 to 7 minute harvest cycles. The red LED will flash on and off 1 second. After 75 consecutive long harvest cycles, the light will be a solid red. And then after 100 continuous long harvest cycles, the machine will shut down, and then that red LED will be a solid red LED. Now again, the same thing here. We say 3.5 to 7 because software 3.2 added this 7-minute maxed harvest, and then everything before that is that 3.5. So just keep that in mind. Double check what software is on that board by looking at the sticker on the relays. Our next is Safety Limit 3, a water loss safety limit. Now the ice machine will go into a 30-minute pause or a 30-minute break if the inlet valve of the water has been open for 4 minutes. So it's been trying to get water for 4 minutes, and that little harvest float hasn't gone up at all. It hasn't opened. So the ice machine is sensing that it's not getting any water, that bobber isn't going up. So it is saying, hey, let's take a break for 30 minutes, see what happens. And after 30 minutes, the machine will restart. If it happens again and again, it's looking for 100 consecutive cycles that this has happened. It'll then flash the SL1 and SL2 LEDs and will not restart after that 100th consecutive cycle. So again, the way this machine shows the Safety Limit 3 is by flashing the Safety Limit 1 and Safety Limit 2. 1 plus 2 equals 3. You can see that they'll flash at the same time. Just keep an eye out for that. Next is our Harvest LED. That is a red LED, and simply put, it just indicates that the machine is now in a harvest sequence, and then once it goes back into the free sequence, that red LED will go out. Our next LED is for the test mode. So to get into a test mode, all you got to do is press and hold that test mode button for 3 seconds, and then all the relays will energize for 2 minutes. And then once that's over, it'll go ahead and make 500 batches of ice, which is about a week's worth of runtime. And next is our clean LED. Simply put, it just means you're in a clean sequence. The only thing that's different about this LED is that it's orange. But otherwise, it just kind of tells you that you're in the clean sequence. Next is our relays. So our very top, our first LED, is that water pump LED. So this is energized when the water pump has energy put to it. It is supposed to be running. During this time, you'll see it's usually in the freeze cycle, the purge, or even 4 minutes into a harvest, just because it needs that water assist. So the pump will pump water over the ice to help that fall. But otherwise, normally it'll just be in the freeze and purge. Next is our compressor LED. So again, this is just on when your compressor is powered. Normally you'll see this pre-chill, freeze, harvest, things like that, and will just be lit red. Our third LED down is for the dump valve. A dump valve will be used during the purge and harvest sequence, things like that, and also will be a red LED. And then lastly there, the fourth LED is for the hot gas valve. There's just a few seconds that'll be on before the machine starts up. And then also in the harvest sequence, but mostly in the harvest sequence you'll see that. Alright, we covered Coolair. Now let's go on to NEO. Now you'll see most of these things are pretty similar. There are a couple of differences, but we'll cover those once we get to them. So to get us started, we're back up to the water fill. It is same red LED. When that water inlet valve is energized, you'll see this LED on. And you'll normally see this LED on during pre-chill and will last until that high level float is satisfied, that water level float. Next is our floats. Again, a green LED, and what we're looking for is for that bobber to float on the water. That's when our LED will show up. That's when it's open or considered open. And again, when this machine is making ice, when it looks to go into harvest, it's looking at this float. So once that little bobber hits the bottom of the stem, it knows, hey, we've used a certain amount of water. We used the right amount of water. That means we have a decent size slab of ice to harvest. And next again is the high level float. Again, it is a green LED. Once that little bobber is up floating, that is when you'll see this LED. And this tells the ice machine, hey, we have enough water to make this slab of ice. Now again, the way to adjust the amount of ice you make, you see on the right there, there is 3 tabs. If you hit it on the highest level, you'll make the most. If you're on the lowest level, you'll make a smaller slab, right? That's how you adjust, is by clipping it between each of those sections. Next again is our bin switch LED. It is a green LED. It works the same as the last one. When that damper is open, the light will be off. When the damper is closed, that light will be solid. And again, troubleshooting, very important here. It can be used to tell whether or not the bin switch is acting up. So that's just something to keep in mind. And remember, if you have a suspect bin switch, you can always ohm it out as well to just double check that. For our safety limit 1, again, it's a long freeze. So it's looking for that 35 to 60 minute freeze cycles. If there's 3 consecutive of those, it will flash the safety limit 1 LED, and it'll also flash the little red wrench that's on the UI of the NEO. So you can look at both of those. You'll be able to tell that they kind of work in tandem there. And then if there's 6 consecutive 35 to 60 minute freeze cycles, the SL1 light will be on solid, and so will the wrench, and then the machine will shut down. Now you can see that little area underneath our board there. It also shows what software versions have which freeze times that the board looks for as far as a long freeze. So if you need to compare, you can see that there. And again, you can see what software version came with the machine by just checking that little sticker on the relays. Safety limit 2 is a long harvest. So with this, the board is looking for a 7-minute harvest, and then if it hits that 7-minute, it'll go into a thaw sequence. So it'll just run that pump, run water over the evap for 170 seconds. What it's looking for is that ice damper to go open and close. It's looking for that ice to fall off. If it doesn't fall off in that first 170 seconds, it'll go again for another 170 seconds, an additional thaw sequence. Now after those have completed, it will go back into freeze, and then it'll take a note. If it has 3 consecutive 7-minute harvest and thaws, the ice machine will shut down, and that SL2 light, the safety limit 2 light, and the service winch will be lit solid. And then with our safety limit 3, it's the same water loss. For the first 4 minutes of that water inlet valve being energized, water's going into the trough, right? It's looking for that harvest float to lift. It's looking for that bobber to float on some water, and then it can start the freeze. So if it doesn't see that within 4 minutes, it'll go into a 30-minute pause, and then after that 30 minutes, it'll restart. It'll try again, and after 100 consecutive cycles of that issue, it will then go ahead and flash that LED and the wrench on the UI. Our next LED again is a simple LED. It's the harvest LED. That's just telling you that you're in a harvest state, and then once it goes back into freeze, that LED will go out. Our last one on the right there is the green test mode LED. So again, this one's slightly different from the Coolair. If you press and hold that test mode button for 3 seconds, it'll go ahead and energize the relays for 3.5 minutes. And then once that's over, it'll go ahead and make 500 batches of ice, which is about a week's worth of runtime. So if your touchpad isn't working, you can go ahead and press this test button. It'll make ice until you can come back with a new touchpad, install it, and then you're all good to go. Our clean LED there, same thing as the last one. It is an orange LED. That's kind of the one thing that puts it apart from the other LEDs. It just tells you that you're in a clean sequence. So as you can see, we're on a Therm 1 LED. As you notice, it only has it on the NEO. Now this thermistor is actually placed inside the water trough, and what it does is controls when a pump pause happens. So it'll shut down that pump, stop water from flowing over the evap. What it's going to do is pause that pump for 25 seconds, and it will flash this LED, and then once that 25 seconds is up, that pump pause will stop, and it'll go ahead and continue that freeze cycle. And it's also worth noting there that Therm LED 2 at the very bottom, you may have noticed, that is not used for anything, neither on NEO or Coolair, so you don't have to worry about that LED. Alright, for our relays, again, back to the water pump LED. The very first one is going to be lit red. It'll be lit that way for the freeze cycle, and also, if need be, when it has a water-assisted harvest. So that's usually happening when harvest has lasted more than 4 minutes. It'll go ahead and run some water over the evap, but more than likely just during the freeze cycle. Second is our compressor LED. Again, it'll be solid red when that compressor is energized. Our third LED from the top will be the dump valve, and again, it'll be lit red, and you'll see it during the purge and harvest sequence. And lastly is our harvest valve, the fourth LED. It'll be our hot gas valve relay. You'll see this during a little equalization, but mostly in a harvest state. Alright, we covered the LEDs for this control board. If you're interested in our next spotlights, we have one for July 2024, the Quiet Cube refrigeration system. You'll see Jason for that one. And then in August, we have the IOX installation. That'll be mine. You'll see me then. And obviously, we have a lot of content to go over, but we also like covering content that you guys want to cover. So if you have any ideas or anything that you would like to add, go ahead and use this QR code or the URL in the description. You can click on it, take a picture of this. It'll take you to a little form. Go ahead and write out whatever you think you'd like to see. We'll try to make a video for it. And just a reminder, the quiz at the end of this, make sure you hit the submit when you're done with it, and then you can screenshot for your scores. And once you're done with that, you'll be entered to get this swag bag here. There's all kinds of rules for that. For every 25 quiz submissions, we'll do a name draw for that. And if there's 50, we'll do a name draw for 2. So make sure you fill out that quiz to get your name entered into the drawing. Alright, and here's your quiz. Again, the URL is in the description below, or go ahead and take a picture of this QR code. I appreciate you guys watching, and I hope to see you in the next one. Have a good one.